welcome back to another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with the movers and shakers, those film and TV and streaming makers, the producers, directors, writers, actors, cinematographers, production designers, costume designers, film editors, sound editors, mixers, and designers, those VFX gurus, composers, stuntmen and women, and so many more. And you all know how much I love film, how much I like to talk, how much I like to talk about film. So it's an absolute joy to give you a front row seat to the who, what, where, when, why, and how of movie making with these interviews. Every week right here on BTL Radio Show, as well as on BehindTheLensOnline.net, the website, and our YouTube channel. We're everywhere. Now, this week it's all about to see or not to see. That is the question. And after hearing today's exclusive interviews with BEN WHEATLey, talking about NORMAL, and ANEIL KARIA, talking all things HAMLET, I think you'll agree the answer to that question will easily be must see. Both of these films are fresh and fantastic, from story to performances to production values. I love them both. And I will admit that when it comes to BEN WHEATLey's film NORMAL, I got giddy watching it. But first up today is director ANEIL KARIA talking about HAMLET, which stars Riz Ahmed. It takes guts to handle Shakespeare and adapt and reimagine, but director ANEIL KARIA did an amazing job with HAMLET. One of the most interesting aspects of the film comes courtesy of Michael Lesslie's screenplay. Michael did a wonderful job adapting the Michael Fassbender-led Macbeth for director Justin Kurzel a few years ago. And once again, he delivers a Shakespearean adaptation that is relatable and attainable for today's audience with HAMLET. Now, HAMLET is Shakespeare's most endearing tragedy, and here it's reimagined in a bold, modern adaptation set within London's elite South Asian community. When HAMLET returns home for his father's funeral, he's stunned to discover his uncle Claudius is about to marry his newly widowed mother. Visited by his father's ghost, HAMLET learns of a brutal murder at Claudius's hands, and he spirals into a quest for vengeance that exposes the rot at the heart of the family's empire while threatening his own sanity. HAMLET boasts a standout cast that includes Riz Ahmed in the title role, along with Morfydd Clark, Joe Alwyn, Art Malik, who is deliciously evil as Uncle Claudius, Sheba Chadha as HAMLET's mother, and Timothy Spall, who is just spectacular as Polonius. Now, there's a reason that ANEIL's HAMLET lingers long after the final frame, and it's not simply because of its striking visuals or bold contemporary setting. It's because, for perhaps the first time in a modern adaptation, the story is not experienced as observation, but rather as immersion. We are not watching HAMLET, we are inside of him. And so much of that comes thanks to the incredible camera work, the visual grammar that is created. I can't say enough about Stuart Bentley's cinematography. And using handheld cameras, we are in HAMLET's mind. We are descending into madness with him. Now, in this exclusive interview with ANEIL, we highlight the visual and emotional impact of the film. The script, stripped down by Michael Lesslie, maintains HAMLET's POV throughout the film, enhancing the immersion. Stuart Bentley's cinematography reflects HAMLET's mental state, from rigid formalism to turbulent handheld shots. And I will say this, while some of the handheld shots are really appropriate, there are a few moments where they get a little bit out of hand, almost to the point of, if you're motion sickness sensitive, you might want to look away from the screen. The film's contemporary setting, including a vibrant wedding scene at the Meridian Grand, and it's a stunning sequence, contrasts with the sterile environments of the crematorium and the family home. Maxwell Sterling's score blends classical and contemporary elements, adding to the film's emotional depth. And of course, we have to talk about working with editor Michael Lesslie, which proved a challenging editing process, but was very successful in maintaining pace and depth. So take a listen as director ANEIL KARIA discusses the to be or not to be of Hamlet. Hello there, ANEIL. How are you?
Hi, Debbie. I'm good, thanks. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Appreciate it.
After watching this film, there is no way I would not speak with you. You have done an amazing job with this adaptation, reimagination of Hamlet. This is one of the most compelling, visually striking adaptations that I have seen on every level.
Thanks so much.
I am beyond thrilled and impressed with it. And I know a lot of it starts with Michael's script, and he had done such a great job with Macbeth back in 2015. Yeah. I think he has surpassed that along with your directorial vision with Hamlet.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Yeah. And I agree. He's such a talented guy, and I think without him, I don't think we'd have had the confidence to kind of pull it apart and find these new ways in, you know?
Well, and this is what I find so striking. Number one, everybody in junior high school, this is what they need to see for an introduction to Shakespeare so they don't become academically adverse to Shakespeare, because it is so relatable. The contemporary setting is spectacularly done and executed. And this is kudos to all your department heads and your craftspeople. Chris Odie's production design is stunning. Niraj's costume design, magnificent. And of course, you've got Stuart Bentley as your cinematographer. But I'm curious, once you have this script, which is stripped down, a lot of extraneous stuff is removed. A couple things are removed that I'm missing, I'll admit that. But
okay, yeah.
and I'm sure you know which parts I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can guess.
But once you look at this is the first time we have seen a Hamlet done where we stay in Hamlet's POV the entire time. This is so immersive. Stuart's camera work with the handheld work, these extreme close-ups, we feel Hamlet's confusion. We feel a descent into madness as he doesn't know what to do, where to turn, who to believe, what's going on. This is one of the most striking changes, and you really bring that to the forefront with the visuals. Talk to me about how you and Stuart developed the visuals to really capitalize on this scripted structure.
Yeah, well, firstly, Debbie, thanks for those kind words. I really appreciate it, and I love that you connected with the film. And yeah, I mean, you know, going back a little further from Stuart and I's conversations, I suppose my way into this was, like you say about junior high school students, I probably ended up a little bit academically averse, as you put it, to Shakespeare, because I didn't quite have that way in, you know? So I probably left school thinking, okay, Shakespeare is something you have to be a bit more intellectual, a bit more cerebral than I am to have a deep connection with it, you know, which I probably don't have the skills for. So when I started going on this journey with Riz, I had to find a way into it that I could understand. And it was never going to be the most scholarly way in, because, you know, that's not who I am. So I had to, what I ended up thinking was, okay, well, all of my filmmaking until this point has about being trying to psychologically root the viewer in the character's experience and make it kind of give us this kind of first-person sensory perspective of the character's experience, you know. Mm-hmm. And I thought, there's no reason I shouldn't do that with Hamlet. You know, just because we think of it as this kind of formal, cerebral experience, there's no, you know, ultimately what it should be is emotional. So let's try and do that. So yeah, That was always the MO. And then with Stuart, it became about how do we best visually tell that story and visually, root the viewer in the perspective. And I think in a loose way, in a broad way, it became about trying to reflect Hamlet's state of mind with the camera. Actually, there's a lot of very visceral, turbulent, handheld stuff that comes.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, for instance, there's a kind of rigid, composed kind of formality about the camera, which seems to reflect Hamlet's kind of effort at staying together, I suppose. And as well as the kind of slightly forced, what's the word I'm looking for? Slightly forced rigidity of this family system, that he's inside, and how oppressive that feels. And then later on, as Hamlet begins to unravel, the camera does too, to a certain extent, and we things begin to feel a lot more turbulent and a lot less rooted in certainty and things like that. So, yeah, Stuart and I think, wanted to kind of reflect Hamlet's state of mind, but also bring a kind of energy and propulsion and spontaneity that seemed to reflect, his mental landscape, I suppose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, Stuart, the visual design is just outstanding. And I particularly love your use of negative space. So much of this is shot is night. The final scene of the film, I was holding my breath. It is perhaps one of the most beautiful scenes that I've seen in a long time, with the inky blue-black notes in the forest, and using the cameras. We're going from a mid-2 shot widening out with quiet. It is just emotionally stunning. This happens throughout. We get the play within the play, which at the 52-minute mark, which is spectacular. You've got the Bollywood-esque influences there. The costuming is off the charts, and then your metaphor with the use of red hands with the dancers, the accusatory blood on your hands, Claudius, as he's sitting there. But just absolutely stunning, and it comes down to playing with the light and giving us that negative space. So we know something is amiss, and sometimes we're not sure what, because Hamlet is not sure what. Just beautifully done. So I'm curious about your choices of going with the darker notes, going with the color, which is vibrantly subdued for a big part of this.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Debbie, and I think, there was something interesting about the palettes that we played with. If you think about the environments up top, the crematorium and that house to some extent, there is a kind of slightly sterile and oppressive absence of vibrancy in those certain rooms. But then, and actually, what's interesting about that wedding location was that, as scripted, that location was, the wedding was meant to take place at the Dorchester. So a very kind of old establishment London hotel with traditional kind of colors and patterns and deep kind of woods and, dark reds and things like that. And we looked around, Dorchester was not really going to work on a budget like ours, but we looked around a lot of central London older hotels, and it felt like we were missing out on something, because we were trying to make this very contemporary Hamlet, but the nature of a lot of these older hotels is that they are, quite old school, traditional, old-fashioned buildings with old-fashioned palettes. Then we decided to go to this place called Meridian Grand, which is on the North Circular, this kind of motorway that runs around London. A very industrial, traditionally unattractive kind of environment, with industrial estates, business parks, things like that. And there's this vast wedding banqueting centre called Meridian Grand there, that's almost got almost this kind of corporate wedding machine where they just churn these weddings through it. It's mostly this kind of beige marble. It's got this enormous car park around it. It's got this kind of brutal, austere kind of feel to it, and it suddenly felt so much more interesting and so much more fitting for this kind of slightly oppressive contemporary world we were in. So yeah, then we go there again. It has this clinical thing, but then you mentioned the dance, the play within the play. Then we took the lighting to a much more heightened and vibrant and almost nauseatingly kind of saturated kind of place. So I think we enjoyed playing with these sudden shifts from this more sterile kind of bathrooms into something much more heady and nightmarish, kind of nauseating, and then back again. And like you say, a lot of nocturnal stuff. You know, we wanted to keep this Hamlet feeling relatively real time. You know, instead of taking place over days and weeks, it feels like everything is just constantly moving forward, that it's unstoppable. So actually, you know, the nature of that just means that night is there. We shot in winter. You get these very short days here. And also something about the night seemed to speak to Hamlet's demons and kind of the, you know, the state of his mind, actually. So, yeah, we lent into all these decisions and we kind of, but it's lovely to hear you notice all that detail.
Yeah, I'm curious, how challenging was the editing process on this? Because of so much that's happening, you want to stay in Hamlet's POV, which obviously Stewart already has in the footage, but still, you've got to cut this together. You've got to give us stabilizing shots with some of the other characters, such as the interactions with Timothy Spall's Polonius, and Timothy is, of course, brilliant as Polonius, and going into the dynamic between Claudius and Gertrude with Art and Sheba. How challenging was finding that balance, that kinetic balance in the editing process?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It was challenging. It wasn't super straightforward edit. You know, we had to go down a lot of dead ends with some scenes before we found the version. Like you say, our whole MO was rooting the viewer in Hamlet's perspective, but, you know, there's a whole world around him, and these characters are hugely important, so we have to give them their time as well. I think it was just a pacing thing as well, to find the rhythm and pacing of this film was, you know, initially complex, but yeah, fortunately we had the time to kind of experiment and kind of find our way through it.
Yeah, I think the pacing is perfect, is spot on here, which isn't something that you can say too often about a Shakespearean production. Most of the time, you're watching something that's been adapted from Shakespeare, and you're looking at your watch. Is it over? Is it over? Is it over? Never once with this film, let me tell you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. It's really hard because you know, we cut stuff at script stage. We also cut stuff in the edit. But then there comes a point where it's like, okay, we want to keep it propulsive, we want to keep the momentum, we want to keep it moving. But there comes a point where you're stripping so much out, like when does Hamlet not become Hamlet? So,
yeah.
So you're walking this line between retaining, you know, enough so that you have the substance and depth, but not so much that, we always knew we wanted it to be propulsive and to keep moving. Yeah.
Well, you definitely achieved that. Now, I have to ask you about your composer, going with Maxwell Sterling. I think given Maxwell's background as a renowned bassist and the darker notes of this film, we also get darker notes within the score. He leans into the darker notes of instrumentation and composition that embrace the darkness of death and Hamlet's descent into madness. I am in love with this score and the orchestral nature of it. So I'm curious what you were looking for with Maxwell for the score.
Yeah, well, I agree. It's such a beautiful score, and he's such a special composer. It's interesting. I work with a music supervisor called Bridget Samuels, who's really amazing, and we've worked together on a few things. And very, very, very early on in the Hamlet process, you know, way before we were even in prep or anything, she sent me Maxwell's work and said, I feel like Maxwell could be interesting for this. And I listened to it, and it was the first time I'd heard him, and I found it really beautiful. But then I almost put that aside, and we went and looked at, you know, a whole host of other composers. And it's interesting that we ended up back at Maxwell. So Bridget's first gut instinct for him was obviously really strong. And yeah, you know, I guess the temptation with a modern Hamlet set in modern London is that you do something ultra modern with the music as well. You know, modern instrumentation, nothing classical, nothing analog, you know, all electronic or something. But actually, what Maxwell does is so much more complex than that, because there's a very contemporary attitude towards it, but a lot of it is rooted in beautiful kind of classical instrumentation. So he seemed to bring both, actually. He seemed to speak to the timeless kind of beauty and foreboding kind of this story, but also bring a kind of contemporary kind of atmosphere to it. And yeah, such beautiful music. And actually, one thing that was interesting about that process and the sound mix and everything was knowing when to strip away, because we had a lot more music at one point, and it's also beautiful what he does. The temptation is to put it there, but then, you know, we also had to kind of remember the power of stripping it away. And in fact, the To Be or Not To Be sequence, till very late on in the process, had music all over it, actually. So you had all this you had the sound design of the car and the engine and the kind of ferocity of that, but you also had score. And it was very, very late in the process, just days before we locked it, that we stripped that off and kind of trusted just the reality, I suppose. So yeah, his music was so good, the temptation was to have it everywhere, but you had to kind of stop yourself.
I want a soundtrack. I'm telling you, I want a soundtrack of it.
Yeah, I hope there is.
Anil, this has been so wonderful getting to speak with you about Hamlet.
Thanks so much for watching it and thinking so deeply about it all and asking such interesting questions. I really appreciate it.
I can't wait to see what you do next. Do more Shakespeare. Do more.
I'm good for that for a bit, I reckon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Debbie. Take care.
And that was ANEIL KARIA talking about Hamlet, which is in theaters right now. And you can find my full review of the film on BehindTheLensOnline.net, along with a companion interview feature. Now, switching gears and genres, we head to the small town of Normal, USA, with director Ben Wheatley. I love Ben Wheatley's work, always have, be it High Rise, Free Fire, Rebecca, Meg 2, or now Normal. Ben can tackle any genre and always delivers first-rate films with high production values, excellent performances, and in many cases, he goes for broke with action and intensity. I think I have to put Normal in the latter category. Directed by Ben and written by the brilliant Derek Kolstad, can we say John Wick? And starring Bob Odenkirk, Normal is the latest collaboration from this powerhouse team. Described as a kinetic neo-Western action flick, with Odenkirk as an unassuming substitute sheriff with a troubled past who, after moving to a quaint Midwestern town, responds to a bank robbery and unknowingly uncovers something far more explosive. And yeah, it gets real explosive. In addition to Odenkirk, Normal stars, among others, Henry Winkler, Lena Headey, Jess McLeod, Ryan Allen, and so many more. Normal is weird, wacky, and wonderful. Brimming with originality, spurting blood, fantastic action, great deadpan humor, first-rate performances. It is an absolute blast, to be perfectly blunt. I mean, when was the last time you watched folks covering up dead bodies and bright red blood with snow and be thankful for having had the blizzard to give them all that snow? I gotta wonder if maybe the folks back east this past winter found a use for some of their many, many feet of snow that they got. Something to think about, especially in some of the neighborhoods back there. But in this exclusive interview, director Ben Wheatley talks about Normal, and starting with the work of cinematographer Armando Salas and the in-camera practical effects, the originality, and the importance of visual storytelling. He emphasizes the use of practical effects over CGI, the character development, and the metaphorical blizzard that also symbolizes the town's chaos. The blizzard is a double entendre. And we start out in Act 1 and, blizzard's coming, people, blizzard's coming, people. And it's the structure of the story. Something's coming, something's coming. So, I mean, there's a lot of cleverness happening within this film. Now, Harry Gregson Williams' score, and he is a favorite of Ben Wheatley's. It's a mix of electronic and folk elements, and it complements the narrative. We also dive into Bob Odenkirk's performance and the stunt team's dynamic work. Who would have ever thought Odenkirk did most of his own stunts? That blew my mind. As Ben discusses that blew my mind. Now, working again with editor Jonathan Amos, who has worked with Ben on some of his other projects like Meg 2 and Rebecca. In addition to, Jonathan Amos was the editor on Paddington 2, and, he knows cuteness as well as bloodshed. And action. But Ben talks about focusing on maintaining pace and tension within the structure of this film. And of course, how can you not talk about casting the Fonz himself, Henry Winkler? Come on. It's always a treat to see Henry on screen, and on the big screen at that. So take a listen as Ben Wheatley talks about the new normal of normal. Hi, Ben.
How you doing, Debbie?
I'm fine. It's been a long time since we last got to speak. High rise, so it's been a decade.
Oh my God, don't say it like that.
Once again, Ben, no matter what you do, you thrill me on screen.
Oh,
be it High Rise, be it Meg 2, which I'm not even going to admit to how many times I have watched that movie. Rebecca, which is it's absolutely stunning. I got to speak with Julian about the costuming on that one. Didn't get to speak.
Oh, right, yeah, cool.
Yeah, didn't get to speak with you, but love Rebecca. I mean, no matter what you do, be it something as, slow burning as Rebecca, or something as high octane and fun as Meg 2, or now, normal. There is nothing normal about this film, Ben. It is weird, wacky, and wonderful. I am in love with this film.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
This is what filmmaking should be. There is originality with this story, which thrilled me more than anything. But then it's all of the practical work that you've done in camera. The blood spurting. We actually get blood squibs that are spurting onto the camera lens in that third act. It just excited me to see that kind of attention and that much care in wanting to create a true cinematic experience.
Yeah, it was one of the things that was said to me right up front that everyone wanted to do in the team was to make it that computers would only get involved if it was for safety or for cleanup. So everything was as practical as we could make it,
And as I'm watching all of the elements, and I watched the film twice, because there's so much visually to unpack, and that doesn't detract from the story. This is a situation where we want the action, we want those visuals. And then I think what it also helped you do is, as we're going through the film, Bob Odenkirk's character of Sheriff Ulysses, his dialogue starts getting sparser, and we rely on seeing Bob's reactions to things. A droll look on his face, downtrodden, stone-faced, or just the whole idea of action speaks louder than words as he goes into that third act and just takes charge with no words, just action. It's a wonderful construct.
Yeah, I mean, it was, a lot of it is about juggling the tone, you know, and it was, we thought a lot about how Ulysses has to be empathetic and not to make him, because there's a lot of action, but we wanted him to feel, the audience to feel that he was worried about everybody, even, you know, that even though there's, you know, goodies and baddies and shades of grey in between, that he wasn't taking any pleasure in what was happening. And I think that's important so that you don't have like an action fatigue as you watch it, that you feel that there's real stakes and there's real people involved in it.
Well, every character in here is so real. And you spend time in the first act letting us get to know these people. You've got a real casting coup with Ryan Allen there, who is hilarious as Deputy Blaine.
He's excellent.
And provides so much comic relief, much of it without being intentionally laugh out loud funny. And that's one of the beauties here. So I'm curious, when you got this script from Derek, who is a genius screenwriter, in my opinion, how did you start to break this down, to bring your vision into this, and then work with your DP, with Armando, to develop the visual grammar to tell this story?
I guess it's through, first of all, it would have been through conversations to make sure that we were all on the same page and we were all kind of swimming in the same direction in terms of the approach. And I think that happened quite quickly because they'd come to me because they liked Free Fire. So they'd seen Free Fire, and there was something in Free Fire that they really enjoyed in terms of the grounded action and the attention to detail of the action. So that was the first step. And then I think with Armando, it was like I'd storyboard a lot. So, and I'd worked with him before on the TV show called Strange Angel, that was for CBS. So we already had kind of a shorthand between us. And then I basically drew the whole film. So not just the action, but all the dialogue sequences, everything. And then we used that as the jumping off point. But it was mainly just a series of quite simple rules of like, you know, as I said, the action has to be as practical as possible. It's all about his, Ulysses' point of view. It's all about the beats of looking at things. Ulysses looking at stuff, so we see his point of view, and then looking at his face for his reaction. So it ties everything together, so you feel like that it's personal, and you understand that every beat and point of it has an emotion to it, rather than it going into a kind of a frenzy of cutting or of the going back to a kind of an attitude of like the 60s and 70s when action films were much more personal, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have great ambiance and atmosphere throughout the film, and I like the fact that it is a slow burn leading up to exactly what is going on in this town of Normal that is clearly anything but normal. Or maybe that is the new normal for towns today. We don't know. But
yeah, I mean, that was, I think that was one of the, it was a big thing that drew me to the script. I mean, obviously, when I get a script from my agent and it's got Coldstadt's name on it and they're saying it's set up with Bob Odenkirk, there's not a lot of, you know, I'm not going to say yes before I've even read it, to be fair, but we can't really say that out loud because that's not very professional, but that's pretty much what happened. But then I read it, and what I really liked about it was that it was a neo-Western, and I'd wanted to do something that was like a Western for a long time. And I really like that kind of Americana and the fact that it's like a one-horse town and it's, you know, a main drag, and it was dealing with all these kind of modern problems. So, yeah.
Now, a big element that I took note of with this film is that the blizzard, the impending blizzard. And it's very metaphoric, because not only is it a blizzard, but there's a blizzard of what's happening within the town that's also coming. So I love that double-edged sword, the double entendre there. But how cooperative was Mother Nature? Because so much of this film relies on snow and a blizzard. I mean, you need a lot of snow to be shoveling it on top of dead bodies and blood.
It was a major concern for me. Like, it's a technical issue across the whole film, and that was like, how do you do it? How do you? And a lot of it's at night as well. So it's like, how do you shoot a storm at night? Do you go to the real places? You know, go out into the middle of nowhere and shoot it. But then, if you get wind and you can't control that, then it's going to blow your snow all over the place and become very difficult. So there was a lot of thought went into that, and then a whole development of, how do you shoot snow, and how do you make it look like snow, and what and you go into a project like this with all sorts of preconceived ideas of what snow looks like, and it doesn't necessarily look that way. So we ended up watching a lot of kind of YouTube footage of real storms, and real storms don't look like they do in movies, but it gave us a clue of how to shoot the storms properly, which is that the snow itself, a certain distance from the lens, becomes mist. So that meant that we didn't have this problem of like filling the whole space all the time with snowflakes. It was only really in an area in front of the camera. So that immediately made things a lot easier to do.
Now, I really have to compliment your stunt coordinators, Emmanuel and Dan, and your entire stunt team, because there is so much action happening here. And it's not just gunfire and gunplay. There is a lot of man-on-man, man-on-woman action, hand-to-hand combat here. And it's a testament to your camera operators, to Armando, also because the stunt work and the action the camera work is so dynamic and clean in shooting it. Because I know that, there are instances where you've got to replace, it's got to be a real actor brought in for a close-up versus a stunt person. But it is so dynamic and cleanly shot. It just really blew me away, which begs the question, how much rehearsal time did you get for your action sequences and your stunt team?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is the people. I mean, Bob does a lot of his stunts, and he does a lot of the fighting himself. And that was always the idea, was that he's been trained up when he did the Nobody films, and he's kept that training going. And when I've been talking to Bob and to Mark Provocero and to Derek about it, they're going, well, look, he can do it. So we've got to see his face, as he does it, because otherwise we don't want people to think that there's too much replacement for stunt for Bob. So he's in there, but it's done mainly with kind of, they're fighting one way and they'll be fighting a stunt person and they fight the other way, and then you swap around the people. So you see, and then in the edit you use as much of you can get away with the actual actors to make it look seamless. But the stunt teams were incredible. And to answer your question, Bob had a bit of rehearsal for his fights, but it wasn't tons. It's not like it's modestly done. So it's not like they were in rehearsals for months for these things. But it's just that they knew what they were doing. So
and a very key element here, and once again, you're working with your fabulous editor, Jonathan Amos. Now, I know Jonathan is a master at building tension. We saw that in Rebecca. He's masterful with comedy, such as in the Paddington 2 films. And of course, in the Meg 2, we've got action, and we've got sharks, and we've got the humor of Jason Statham, and Jonathan can edit it all beautifully. So how challenging was the edit on Normal to find your pacing? Because this is a very specific pacing especially with a neo-Western.
Yeah, I mean, it's more that I think the main shape of it came together reasonably quickly, but a lot of it is about the detail and the honing of it, and that's something that John's really excellent at, is like the compression of scenes. So they come down, they get faster, but you don't notice, or I don't notice it. So he's taking the air out of stuff so that it feels like it's like an express train that, but it never feels rushed, you know. And I think that's the real skill of an editor, to understand how to bend time like that.
And of course, the icing on the cake here is your score. I am in love with the score of this film, Ben. What were you looking for musically to accompany this weird, wacky, and wonderful world of Normal?
Well, working with Harry Gregson Williams again, who did the score for Meg too, but Harry's also, you know, if you look at his IMDb, he scored a lot of Tony Scott movies, and he scored a lot of Ridley Scott movies. And I wanted a score that had that kind of, it was a modern score, but a modern action score, and had that propulsive feeling. But then also had that feeling of folk music and like American folk and guitar and all those kinds of things. So it's kind of, it's half electronic and half guitar. And then on top of that, we had a really great selection of needle drops and original music that we got to use, which all ties in with the themes of the film.
I do have to ask you, Ben, how did it feel to have the quintessential piece of Americana, Henry Winkler, come on board for this film? People are going to go nuts when they see the Fonz playing the mayor.
Yeah, I mean, I love Henry, and he's, you know, I watched Happy Days when I was a kid, so it was a particular thrill to get to work with him. And he's also like the nicest guy in all of Hollywood. So when he turns up on set, everyone makes everybody happy. He also takes photographs on set, which he's been doing since Happy Days, apparently. So somewhere out there is an incredible archive of the history of cinema, thanks to Henry Winkler.
Well, thanks to Ben Wheatley, we now have another spectacular, big action film to go see. And this is a film, it's got to be seen on the big screen. Has to.
Definitely.
Just another job so well done, Ben. And I can't thank you enough for taking time to talk with me this morning. I don't want to let another 10, 11 years go by before we chat again.
Okay. I better keep making some movies then.
Yeah, you better get to work. Get to work. Ben, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
And that was director Ben Wheatley discussing Normal. And you can all see Normal for yourselves this Friday, the 17th, in theaters nationwide. And I am so thrilled that this film was made for the big screen. The distributor is putting it out on the big screen. And having seen the film, it is the only way to see it. It's fantastic. So, that's all the time we have today. Make sure to check out both Hamlet and Normal in theaters. And for my reviews to these films and more, go to behindthelensonline.net. And there's some other new interviews up as well. And I have to tell you, you're going to be hearing and reading shortly about some first phase Emmy interviews that are now completed. I have them done. I'm just getting the go-ahead from the publicist as to when they want them out. One is with Dana Gonzalez, cinematographer turned director, who just knocked it out of the park this past season with Alien Earth. And when I spoke with him the other day, he's currently working on season 2 right now. So, but it's a great interview as we break down all the individual episodes of Alien Earth. And then on Friday, I just spoke with stunt coordinator Andy Ruck about the series The Lowdown. And that's another winning series. Andy is also right now working on season 2 of The Lowdown. And he took time out during the day to hop on the phone with me to do a very lengthy interview about the work on the lowdown. And Andy and I are going to be talking again in the coming weeks because he's also stunt coordinator on, and now I'm totally blanking, Chad Powers. You know, sometimes, you know, the fact I don't write things down, the brain just doesn't want to work. But no, Andy is also the stunt coordinator on Chad Powers, which also will be having a campaign for, at least a phase 1 campaign for Emmy consideration. So looking forward to talking with Andy again, because the stunt work in Chad Powers and in the lowdown is different as night and day. So I'm looking forward to that. But you guys are going to get to hear and read my very lengthy interviews with Andy and with Dana in the coming weeks, as well as make sure to check out another film that just opened. It's opening slowly. It's rolling out across the country. Put it on your radar, people. Watching Mr. Pearson. It is an incredibly moving film. You may hear Dylan Bentledge, the writer-director. I haven't decided yet, but I think next Monday that may be the interview that you're going to hear. It's an important film. It deals with dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's very inspiring and uplifting. It's a narrative, and it's just beautiful. And everything about that film is already on the website. But I may let you listen to Dylan's interview next week. But we'll see what happens. So, this week, you got BEN WHEATLEY and Normal. You've got ANEIL KARIA and HAMLET. Go to the theater. See these great films. And a few others that are out there in theaters too. And until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.